With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has arrived in Muscat in the Sultanate of Oman as part of a state visit to this brotherly country. And the workers of the Algerian radio and television are celebrating today the 62nd anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty over both the national radio and television. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he's terrified by the increasing number of victims in Gaza, and the Israeli occupation pursued its bombardments of the territory, killing and wounding several Palestinians. And those were the major developments. Now, the full news edition. Good afternoon. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has arrived in Muscat, the Sultanate of Oman, as part of a state visit to this brotherly country. The visit comes as part of strengthening of the bonds of brotherliness, cooperation and consultation between Algeria and Oman. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has affirmed earlier that both Algeria and Egypt agree on the importance of deepening coordination and consultation on Arab issues and everything concerning the region. In a joint statement to the press with his Egyptian counterpart, Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, at the end of their talks at the Al-Ittihadiyya Presidential Palace in Cairo, President Tebboune said there is an understanding and a common desire to make or to work together to achieve new investments, particularly in the fields of energy, housing and construction. In this context, he assured that Egyptian companies that wish to invest in our country are welcome, highlighting that he gave the green light to the Minister of Housing to work with his Egyptian companies with Egyptian companies in the field of architecture and construction of new cities. The President of the Republic wished in this context the major Algerian-Egyptian Joint Commission could meet early 2025 to consider the start of a new stage in terms of investments and exchange at all levels.
في تفاهم تام، في رغبة في العمل مع بعض هنا وهناك باستثمارات جديدة، حيث وصلنا إلى ما يقارب $1 مليار ليجي من مصر الشقيقة، ونطمح في أكثر، نطمح فيما أكثر. فيما يخص الاستثمار الحالي الشقيقة مصر في ميدان الطاقة فهو ماشي على كل حال، نزيدوا ندعموه بالنسبة للتنقيب سواء على الغاز في المناطق الجنوبية ولا حتى في المناطق أوفشور بحرية. الجزائر مفتوحة على كل حال، مرحبا. إذن بالنسبة لعلاقاتنا الثنائية نتمنى فقط أن في بداية 2025 السنة المقبلة إن شاء الله تجتمع اللجنة العليا وتدرس إمكانيات انطلاق كذلك في خماسي جديد تاع علاقات واستثمار وتبادل كل المستويات.
After thanking the Egyptian president for the warm welcome he received, the President of the Republic affirmed that one cannot talk about the Algerian Revolution without recalling Egypt's support to all people seeking freedom from colonialism. He added that Algeria-Egypt relations are strong and are based on solid brotherly foundations and more than 70 years of common struggle in defending the foundations of the Arab nation, reiterating his thanks to the President of Egypt and his people, as well as to all those who helped the glorious November Revolution.
علاقتنا مع مصر يعرفها الخاص والعام أنها علاقات وطيدة، أنها علاقات أخوية قوية بنيت على أسس قوية جدا في نضالنا المشترك منذ أكثر من 70 سنة. شاركنا مع بعض في الدفاع على مقومات الأمة العربية، وتنم هذه الفرصة نتاع الذكرى 70 لاندلاع الثورة الجزائرية المجيدة لأشكر مرة أخرى أخي السيسي ومن خلاله كل الشعب المصري وكل من ساهم آنذاك في مساعدة على انطلاق الثورة تاعنا.
Regarding the situation in Palestine, the President of the Republic deeply deplored the daily genocide and famine caused by the Israeli occupation through the scarcity of water, food, and medicine, and the closure of hospitals. He said Gazans are facing a real genocide, hailing the Palestinian people's resilience, attachment to their land, and refusal to undergo new exile.
نحيي بهذه المناسبة الشعب الفلسطيني على صموده وتحمله ما لا يتحمله إلا القليل من البشر للبقاء في أراضيه، ولن يقبل أن يهجر من جديد من أراضيه. إن شاء الله الفرج قريب. مع أشقائنا في مصر نحاول كيفاش ننقذ الموقف مع المبادرة نتاع أخي فخامة الرئيس السيسي لهدنة تسمح لإدخال كل ما يحتاجوه الغزاويين إلى غزة في انتظار حل نهائي. والحل النهائي ما يكون إلا بالطبع يعني بتسيير الفلسطينيين لأراضيهم.
In this regard, he stressed that Algeria and Egypt are trying to appease the situation with the initiative of President al-Sisi for the delivery of aid to the population of the Gaza Strip, while waiting for a definitive solution that should allow the Palestinians regain possession of their territories, reassuring that Algeria spares no effort at the United Nations Security Council to reach a definitive solution and put an end to this genocide. He affirmed that Algeria's position will remain immutable, stressing that the fundamental solution remains the setting up of a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders with Al-Quds as its capital.
الجزائر تعمل كل ما في وسعها في مجلس الأمن لمحاولة الوصول إلى حل أو بالأقل إلى توقيف الإبادة صريحة في فلسطين. موقفنا لم يتغير ولن يتغير. الحل الجذري هو دولة فلسطينية في حدود 1967 وعاصمتها القدس الشريف إن شاء الله.
Referring to the situation in brotherly Libya, the President of the Republic reiterated Algeria's constant position in favor of an inter-Libyan solution through the holding of elections.
ليبيا شقيقة. الموقف تاعنا لن يتغير، أن الحل ما يكون إلا ليبي، والحل الجذري هو في الانتخابات. الشرعية نتاع الانتخابات هي اللي تخلي من يستفاد من الشرعية تصويت تاع الشعب الليبي هو اللي قادر يسير ليبيا إن شاء الله. بالنسبة للسودان تأسف كثير على ما يجري بين الأشقاء. أمور هذه صعبة جدا، لا في الدين تاعنا ولا في الأخلاق تاعنا ولا في احنا ومصر دولتين لن تتدخل أبدا في بين الأشقاء إلا للصلح، ما نغدي لا طرف ولا آخر.
Regarding the situation in Sudan, the president deplored what is happening between the Sudanese brothers, recalling that Algeria and Egypt have never intervened between brothers except for reconciliation. For his part, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi affirmed that his talks with President Tebboune focused on ways and means to develop relations and cooperation between the two countries, indicating that the Algerian-Egyptian Major Joint Commission will soon hold its 9th session in Cairo for greater cooperation between the two countries. In this line, the Egyptian president recalled the great opportunities offered for cooperation between Egypt and Algeria, which were tackled during the meeting that brought together the delegations of the two countries.
During our discussions with His Excellency the President of the Republic, we discussed means and ways of developing relations and partnership in all areas and at higher levels. Let me also announce that the 9th session of the Grand Joint Commission will be held shortly in Cairo to tackle new partnership perspectives between the two countries. With the level of convergence between Algeria and Egypt and their willingness to develop their relations was so evident since the first visit of the President of the Republic. There are great opportunities for cooperation and investment between the two countries that we have examined in our meetings, which was extended to delegations. I would like to emphasize that discussions with the President of the Republic and between the delegations of both countries were very positive.
بيني وبين فخامة الرئيس وعلى مستوى الوفدين كانت مباحثات إيجابية جدا.
As for the current situation in the Middle East, President al-Sisi said he discussed with President Tebboune the importance of recovering security in the region and achieving a ceasefire.
During my talks with the Algerian president, we tackled the situation in the region and the serious danger threatening the region since the beginning of the war on Gaza and the expansion of the war on Lebanon, as well as the situation in Libya and Sudan. There is a total agreement on the importance of recovering security in the region. The magnitude of the misery of our brothers in the Gaza Strip is dramatic. The siege on Gaza has been maintained for 4 months now. Thus, all the efforts we make with all our partners and brothers aim to achieve a ceasefire and a law in aid. Egypt in the recent days launched an initiative aimed at reactivating talks and achieving ceasefire for 2 days to ensure the exchange of prisoners for hostages in exchange of some prisoners in the Israeli prisons. Then during 10 days, negotiations will carry on.
Let's note that the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, received in Cairo the Egyptian businessman Ahmed Sadiq al-Suwaidi, owner of the largest Egyptian electricity company. You still listen to Radio Algeria International and commenting on the statement of President Abdelmajid Tebboune regarding relieving the Palestinians from their current suffering. The representative of the Hamas resistance movement in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, had the following.
The declaration made by President Tebboune from Cairo bears important indications and confirms the authenticity of Algeria's stance regarding the issue and reflects Algeria's capacity to keep the focus on the most important issue despite all the international pressure aimed at depriving Gaza from its Arab and Muslim characters. What Tebboune affirmed on Gaza's ruling using such a clear language confirms to all that the attempts to ignore the Palestinian people's will and using the repercussions of the aggression on our people, imposing an administration, a political vision will be fruitless.
That was the statement of the representative of the Hamas resistance movement in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan. And in fresh news, upon arrival to Oman, President Tebboune was received by His Majesty the Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Muazzam. And back to the country, the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Army General Said Shangriha, has received the Vice Minister of the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Joaquim Quintasola. The meeting came as part of the working visit of the Vice Minister of the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces to Algeria at the head of a large military delegation. Both parties stressed the need to coordinate efforts to overcome the current challenges and find ways to strengthen cooperation relations between the two countries. On this occasion, Army General Said Shangriha stated that relations between Algeria and the Republic of Cuba are deep and historic and based on common values and solid principles that have established an exemplary bilateral cooperation, stressing that the relations between both countries are based on solidarity, support for oppressed peoples, and the defense of just causes in the world, notably the Sahrawi and Palestinian causes. And the Vice Minister of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba welcomed for his part the sincere will of the Algerian Chief of Staff of the National People's Army to strengthen bilateral military relations in line with the aspirations of the leaders of the two friendly countries to lay the foundations for fruitful cooperation. The Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Lounes Magraman, has received here in Algiers Abdullah Dardari, Assistant Secretary General and Director of the United Nations Development Programme UNDP Regional Bureau for Arab States. During this meeting, the two parties carried out an assessment of the state of cooperation between Algeria and the UNDP in various sectors. They also discussed issues of common interest, in particular those related to the regional and international context marked by the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian and Lebanese peoples and the role of international organizations in providing aid and relief to the populations of both Gaza and Lebanon. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and the workers of the Algerian radio and television are celebrating today the 62nd anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty over both the national radio and television. October 28, 1962 is a significant date in Algerian history, marking the liberation of Algerian radio and television. Speaking on this special occasion, the general manager of the Algerian radio, Adel Slaqchi, said that the Algerian radio still follows the steps of those who fought for the sovereignty of Algeria and its institutions.
ونحن نسترجع الذكرى لبسط السيادة على الإذاعة والتلفزيون.
We commemorate today the anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty over Algerian radio and television. Today, we take stock of the rich history made by generations of the revolutionary voice of Algeria who keep building a new victorious Algeria. Challenges faced by radio workers through the various channels and stations for reliable information offered an objective and solid public service that meet the aspirations of citizens in the light of current global transformations. Congratulations to us and to radio and TV workers. May we achieve more splendor and success.
مزيداً من التألق والنجاحات إن شاء الله.
The manager of Radio Algeria International, Mohamed Zebda, for his part, said today is a very special day, especially that it coincides with the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of Algeria's revolution.
نحتفل اليوم بهذه المناسبة العزيزة.
Today we commemorate this very special event, which is the recovery of sovereignty over the radio and television, which coincides with this time with the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of one of the greatest revolutions in the world. We remember this event when a symbolic figure of this institution, who is late Abdelaziz Shkiri, removed the French flag on October 28th, 1962, so that the first anniversary of November 1st would not be celebrated with a French flag on top of a sovereign building.
Let's note that the Algerian radio and television are celebrating today the 62nd anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty over both the national radio and television. To the Middle East now, as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was terrified by the increasing number of victims in Gaza. The Israeli occupation pursued its bombardments of the territory, killing and wounding several Palestinians. According to Palestinian sources, more than 1,000 people were killed in the attacks launched by the Israeli occupation against another part of the enclave. More than 100,000 people have been displaced by the Israeli operations that targeted the regions of Jabalia, Beit Hanun, and Lahia. Airstrikes carried out by the Israeli army also hit the central part of Gaza. This came as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the living conditions of the Palestinian population had become unbearable on account of the devastation and privation resulting from the Israeli military operations that run counter the international law. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and the UN officials stressed the necessity to ensure the protection of the civilians, including the humanitarian workers whose activities, he said, must not be hampered. The UN chief reiterated his calls for a ceasefire to be implemented immediately, stressing the importance of forcing those responsible for the massacre in Gaza to account for their crimes. The situation continued to worsen in Gaza as negotiations are expected to resume in Doha to try and secure ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Algeria has called for the holding of an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to examine the situation in the Middle East following the renewed attacks on Iran. And in Lebanon, at least 7 people were killed and 17 others wounded in new airstrikes carried out today by the Israeli occupation against the southern town of Tyre that shelters archaeological sites and listed by UNESCO. The news agency ANI said several districts of the town were pounded after the Israeli forces ordered the population to evacuate and to move northward. Yesterday, at least 21 people were killed and 38 others injured, including some seriously, in a series of air raids that hit the surrounding areas of Saida in the southern part of the country. Meanwhile, the EU diplomacy chief, Josep Borrell, once again urged for the enforcement of an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon and rejected as unacceptable the repeated attacks launched by the Israeli occupation against the UNIFIL forces. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the Belgian public television has said that the ruling issued by the European Court of Justice cancelling the two trade agreements concluded between the EU and Morocco constituted a major setback for the Moroccan authorities, for which it has been for years the axis of Morocco's foreign policy. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 2:50 minutes Algiers time, and now a program on the occasion of Radio and Television Day. The workers of the Algerian radio and television celebrate on October 28th the anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty over the two enterprises. This date is an unforgettable date marked by the courage of a handful of Algerian journalists and technical engineers who took responsibility of the Algerian radio and television so that this national institution keeps functioning after the abrupt departure of the French staff in 1962. The sudden departure of the French staff came in reaction and protest against the replacement of the French flag over the building by the Algerian flag after Algeria's hard-won independence. The French authorities ordered their staff to leave the building of the national television and radio at once, but Algeria succeeded in maintaining the broadcast of programs dealing a blow to the French aspirations. Time. During the Algerian Revolution against the French colonization between 1954 and 1962, Algerian mujahideen or war veterans were aware of the role of radio and television then for promoting the Algerian cause and making Algeria gain international support. The role of radio was also important to break the information blockade imposed by the brutal French colonization to shush the voice of Algerian people. Radio and television were a means of information and propaganda at the service of the Algerian Revolution and legitimate cause, especially that the socio-economic conditions at the time were marked by illiteracy and poverty. Radio was also a strong tool to counterattack the false propaganda of colonial France and to bring the Algerian people around the objective of national independence and sovereignty. The radio Sawt al-Arab, Arabic for the Voice of Arabs, in Cairo, dedicated 3 programs per week starting in 1955 to Algeria in both Arabic and French. For its part, the Tunisian radio also broadcast 3 times a week a program entitled Hear the Voice of Revolutionary Algeria. The Voice of Algeria became then also heard from Damascus through the program The Voice of the Revolutionary Algeria, and in 1958 from Baghdad and Tripoli. In Libya, Tripoli radio station and the Benghazi radio broadcast 3 programs per week devoted to the Algerian cause. Many people joined the revolution thanks to the radio programs and the news they used to receive from students, veterans, and members of the National Liberation Front. All these historical facts shed light on the power and impact of radio in Algeria's history. This wireless machine that transmitted the voice of hope and freedom conveyed by the people who believed in the nation's cause and wanted to further promote it. With the development of the Liberation War, especially after the holding of the Somam Congress in August 20th, 1956, to better organize the revolution, the leaders of the Algerian Revolution started considering the creation of a radio emitting from within Algeria. On December 16, 1956, 2 years after the outbreak of the revolution, the secret radio was created on the Algerian west border under the motto, "Here is the radio of the free and revolutionary Algeria. The voice of the Liberation Front talks to you from the heart of Algeria." The programs of this radio were centered on information on the battles of the war veterans, political and military commands, patriotic songs, as well as religious sermons that encourage people to commit to the country's freedom and independence. There were also programs on the history of Algerian people. French authorities multiplied efforts to cover up the revolution and tried to jam the programs of the radio and even to bomb the radio station. The French colonial army attacked the station of the secret radio twice without success, the first in April 1957 and the second in July the same year. The bombs fell out of the station zone. With the availability of some developed communication machines made in America, the revolution started broadcasting with a better quality material. Following the creation of the Algerian Provisional Government in 1958, a focus was laid on the importance of promoting Algerian culture and art through the secret radio. In July 1959, the secret radio started broadcasting from the Moroccan city Nador. The reopening ceremony of the station in Morocco was hosted by late Issa Masoudi, known as the Sublime Voice of the Algerian Revolution. The history of radio in Algeria is a history of a voice that survived all kinds of oppression and threats. A voice that the then French colonization wanted to hear trembling, but in vain. Now, Algeria has 55 national radio channels, and these channels are also available online. They broadcast all kinds of programs in Arabic, Amazigh, and foreign languages. One of the most tangible examples to be given is this channel, Radio Algeria International, a channel that sheds light on Algeria's position on the issues besetting the world and on what is happening inside Algeria. It gives information in Arabic, French, English, and Spanish, and is considered the voice of Algeria in the world. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and now the headlines. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has been received at the airport of Muscat, Oman by His Majesty the Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Muazzam as part of a state visit to this brotherly country. The workers of the Algerian radio and television are celebrating today the anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty over both the national radio and television. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he is terrified by the increasing number of victims in Gaza, and the Israeli occupation pursued its bombardments of the territory, killing and wounding several Palestinians. That's it for our news edition. Goodbye.
مع إذاعة الجزائر الدولية لن تفوتكم لحظة